I am so happy to be joined by businessman, entrepreneur, private astronaut, um, deep sea explorer, pilot. You've done it all basically. Larry Connor, how are you doing today?
Jacob, thanks for having me.
Well, you're a fellow Ohio native. You live outside Dayton, so as somebody who's from Toledo originally, it's great to be speaking with somebody at your level from the same state.
Yeah, by the way, I think Toledo is a great town.
Thank you. I was born in, I was, well, I was raised in Sylvania, technically.
Okay, well, I'm not familiar with that area, but the overall Toledo area, I think is a great area.
Amen. So take us through being an entrepreneur, creating something is not easy. Where did you kind of fulfill the passion to like want to do it yourself, and lead a life like that? As I was doing research on you, I saw, you
Sure.
know,
So I really started in high school. By the way, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version. I started in high school, and we started a business, painting business, painting houses, because I and a buddy of mine couldn't get jobs during the summer. And then that business grew. And then in college, I had a couple of different businesses, and I like trying to build a business. I like finding good people to work with. I enjoyed, making customers happy. I like the fact that there were measurements, accountability, and outcomes, from a financial perspective. And so that journey just kind of continued. And so I think the last time I got a paycheck from a company was when I was 26 years old. And it's very difficult. It's very challenging. There's lots of adversity, lots of obstacles. But on the flip side, uh, it's, you know, incredibly rewarding. By the way, I'm not saying necessarily financial reward. Some cases that can be, but in terms of self-image, self-achievement, helping other people, it's great, but only for certain people.
No doubt about it. And, being an entrepreneur yourself, you've also been a risk taker at times, which we'll get down to later in the line, how you're a racer, a pilot, all that fun stuff. But what is the most challenging part of saying to yourself, okay, I'm getting a paycheck from somebody else? And you mentioned at the age of 26 is when you said the last time you got a paycheck was.
Sure.
What's it like when you finally decide I'm going to try this thing on my own? At the age of 26, I'm 19 and a lot of my people who listen are in college or young adults. So at 26, you must have had a lot of responsibilities in your life. What was that like defining moment like where you're like, I'm gonna 100% go on it on my own?
Yeah.
What's that like?
So I think a couple of thoughts. Number one is it's really liberating. On the other hand, it's kind of daunting and can be scary. But you can't let those negative thoughts control what you're going to do. Ultimately, you have to have belief and conviction. And if you do, your chances are good to be successful. And so we always talk about in any business endeavor, do we have the four P's? Do we have the right group of people to take on the challenge? Do we have a plan? By the way, it can be a basic plan. Okay. Do we have some processes or systems that we're going to use to execute this plan? And then lastly, do we have the commitment, and we call it perseverance, the fourth P, to go out and face the obstacles uh, and persevere to be successful.
Wow. I appreciate you sharing the four P's. That you've decided to come up with and use it in your life. Um, which one, if you had to pick one that was, and they're all important, I can tell, especially to you and how you've built your companies over the years, but if you had to pick one, which one would be the most important?
Yeah. So the first one's going to be people. If you don't have the right people, starting with yourself, it's not going to work. You're not going to be successful by any definition. And then I might jump to the last P, perseverance. If you don't have perseverance because you're going to start a business or you're going to buy a business and try to scale it, you will face obstacles and adversity. If you don't have just that grit and perseverance, you're probably not going to make it to the other side.
Wow, that's a very good point. And then how has being an entrepreneur kind of led you to, being a thrill seeker in a way? Obviously you've gone to space. Was there a favorite thing? And when you go to space, especially at the space station, there's the Russians up there. Obviously you were on the first all private mission. I've had Jared Isaacman on, who recently did the spacewalk, but on your mission, it was the first private mission, but there was still, NASA astronauts up there. There were still Russian cosmonauts up there. So how did teamwork play a factor from the business world to then when you were in space doing something totally different?
Sure. So let me go back to an earlier comment about thrill seeking. We're not thrill seekers. We never do anything if it doesn't meet two standards. Can we do it safely and can we do it successfully? Whether it's going to the International Space Station or the Mariana Trench down 36,000 feet, or flying a hot air balloon to 38,000 and stepping off and setting a world, whatever it may be, we think thrill seekers are people who don't live very long. And so we're going to manage risk. Second, in terms of the International Space Station, first off, when you get there, they're in the Russians versus the Americans. We are all teammates there. And for example, if you think about the International Space Station, it's like a spine. And in the center of it, on the US side, is called Node 1. That's where we eat kind of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And right next to it is the Russian module. Well, that hatch is open. So they'll sometimes come over and eat dinner and things like that. And you need both teams, both US and Russian, in order to successfully operate the International Space Station. So it's a total team effort. And the 3 Russian cosmonauts we had up there were fabulous. We were fortunate from the US side to have 3 US citizens, 1 European in crew 3, and they were tremendous and very helpful. So we were very fortunate to have a just exceptional group the 17 days we were there.
And for you, what was there a part that was kind of the most, I don't want to say nerve-wracking, was it takeoff? Obviously, a lot of astronauts I've interviewed said it's re-entry. That's the one that's more scary. What was it for you, if there was anything fear-wise?
So I would tell you, I'm going to change the question. If you said, what was the most exciting and exhilarating? Re-entry. And it's about the last roughly 45 minutes. And it's very dynamic. If you like roller coasters, you'd like that. You can feel that you're literally falling out of the sky heading toward Earth. But the technology is so good. The SpaceX Crew Dragon is so good. The safety measures are so good that, yeah, that was kind of the highlight. The other highlight for me is just literally living on station in zero gravity and how you interact and how you can sleep. Well, you can sleep in any position. You can be like this. You can be head down, head up. It doesn't matter. So the total experience is, as you can imagine, kind of very unique.
Crazy. And was it, did you meet Elon Musk before your launch? What was that like his
Oh,
axiom? So you never met him. Wow.
no,
Wow. That is crazy. I guess with the axiom, you kind of did your own training, if I'm correct, at Johnson Space Center.
no, not really. So at Johnson Space Center, where NASA's headquarters, we had to go through and fulfill most of all of the requirements for a NASA astronaut. For example, like emergency procedures. And there's a mock-up in Building 9 at Johnson Space Center of the International Space Station. And so each astronaut has to go in there, and depending upon what you're doing, it's a 2 to 3 hour oral test. And there's two sections. One section, you got to get at least 80%. The other one, you have to get 100%. You can't make one mistake or you're out. And we all passed that and did very well. So, so we spent, this is a little known fact, we spent 10 months, I did, training between Johnson Space Center and SpaceX in Southern California. So no, Axiom was just kind of the organizer and facilitator. By the way, they did a very important job, but all the training was SpaceX and NASA.
Wow. Good to know because people are wondering about what's going on with the different things that are going on in the private space world now, especially at a school like Purdue, where the students who I attend school with are going to be engineers at those companies going
Yeah.
forward. And I got to
Here's a
ask,
big clarification. So at NASA, they have people who are called space tourists. So if you go to Blue Origin, you train for, I think it's 1 day.
yeah, it's
They
suborbital.
shoot you in a rocket, and you're in weightlessness at what, I think a little above 60,000, 65,000 feet, something like that, for about 8 or 10 minutes. That's a space tourist.
Yep.
A space participant may be somebody who goes up, there's a hot air balloon being designed, and you could be up there for, I don't know what it was, 6 or 8 hours or something like that. And then way above that is private astronaut. And that's the really rigorous one. And quite frankly, being part of the AX-1 crew, we were the first people. And so we knew there were a lot of eyes on, there were a lot of pressure, especially from NASA and safety concerns. And we had to get the thing right, or the whole private astronaut, private mission, private enterprise is going to be, it's going to be set back. And fortunately, I think we met or exceeded their expectations.
Which is incredible. I had John Schaffner on before he did Axiom 2 after you. So quite a bit of different space folks. What kind of obviously you've done a lot of things when it comes to the ocean. You've also been to space. Which one did you enjoy better if you had to choose one?
Sure. They're both quite different, so in their own way, they're great. But if you made me pick one, I'd pick space.
Wow. And what are you looking most forward to? This is obviously going to happen in the future. What are you looking most forward to with going to visit the Titanic?
Well, first off, what's reported and what the facts are don't really match. Go back to our earlier conversation. We're not going to do anything that we can't do safely and successfully. So this is a long-term, 2-year process to build this revolutionary sub. We have to go through a number of certifications. And at any point in time, if it's not certified, we won't dive. So it is a dramatically different approach than what the Ocean Gate disaster was, which, in my opinion, was absolutely an avoidable disaster. But when you use bad technology, bad engineering, bad equipment, unproven materials like the carbon fiber, that becomes very dangerous. And by the way, their sub was not certified. And frankly, it would never have gotten certified, in my opinion. So if you think about this certification process and you look at submersibles, in the 50 years that they've been certifying these submersibles, and anyone that got fully certified, there has never been an accident. Never. Not one. And the first one that is in this uncertified vehicle, which tragically, you lost 5 people's lives, the founder and 4 others. Well, in my opinion, if the founder wants to take crazy risks, go ahead, but I'm not sure you want to take 4 other people along.
I appreciate you sharing all this about that so that there's clarification on it because people always see news headlines. So thank you for clarifying all this about how your process is going to be totally different because people look at that mileage and like, what's going on? Why would somebody go down? So thanks for clarifying that. And
Well, one of the issues is not everybody in media, but unfortunately, a number of people in media, it's all about how sensationalized can you make it? And not all the time, but sometimes the facts get lost. And so we had 170 media requests from around the world. Actually, I guess it went above 170. And so we tried to pick 7 or 8 that we hoped would tell the correct, factual story.
wow. Well, thank you. I know that's a few months later now, but thank you so much for choosing to come on my show. I appreciate it.
Sure.
And kind of getting back to entrepreneurship real quick and some young advice before I close. What is something that somebody told you from an early age that you've kept with you your entire life?
So I'm going to have 2 thoughts. Number one is I was fortunate that, I kind of grew up middle class, but the people next door owned a small business. They only had like 4 employees. And the fellow who ran it, I had just graduated or I was about to graduate from college. And he essentially told me, hey, look, college boy, you've got all this theory, but you don't really have reality. If you want to potentially start your own business, go sell something to the public. And I was always kind of a fan of cars. I mean, I had kind of old junky cars, and so there was a Volkswagen dealership about 6 or 7 minutes from my house. And so graduated from school at that time, trying to find real career jobs were hard to do. So I went there and sold Volkswagens for a year. It was the best learning experience because you're having to deal with the public. They're coming onto a car lot. It's not like today where you buy them online. They're kind of skeptical that the salesperson's going to try to sell them not what they need, but just what they want to sell. And so that was great experience. So that's one. Learn. And those are skills that, whether it's then or today, you still use and are still applicable. The second thing is, someone told me many years ago, you'll never outperform your own self-image. So just think about that. If you think you can do something, well, you got a chance to do it. Excuse me. But if you're like, oh, no, I could never do that. Well, then you're also right, because your belief in your self-image, you can't do it. Well, you're pretty much doomed for failure before you start. So those would be 2 anchor points or thought points for your audience to think about.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And two last things I want to get you because I know you're a very busy man is I'll close with what's the most rewarding thing that you've been able to do. But before I get there, what is something to you that you enjoy to do when you're up in the air flying? Is there something that sparks your interest the most? The avionics? Is it the view? What is it? What's
Yeah, so really it's the kind of flying I enjoy doing is I used to fly aerobatic planes in competition. So that's very technical and very challenging. So the pure flying, what they call the stick and rudder skills, I really enjoy. I also own a fighter jet. So flying that and what it's capable of doing. Again, it's back to really good flying skills, stick and rudder. So that's what I enjoy most about flying.
wow, awesome. And then to close out, what is the most rewarding thing that you've been able to do in your life so far?
I'm not going to be able to tell you one thing. I've been very fortunate to be able to do a lot of different things. So trying to pick out one that says that's better, for me, it's always the next thing. I don't think you should live in the past. You can certainly remember those things, but I'm not sure. We've all met people who, especially people as they get older, they kind of live in the past. Hey, you remember what I did way back when? To me, it's about what are you doing today and what are you going to do in the future? And that's not only what you're going to do for yourself, but what are you going to do to help other people?
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that life lesson there. And is there any other piece of advice you have to share for young people? I know you hit on a lot of it already.
Work hard, don't create glass ceilings, aim high. If people tell you that's impossible, you can't do, don't be deterred by those people because those probably are people who haven't done very much with their lives.
Wow. Well, Larry, thank you so much for joining the show today. I really appreciate it and the advice you were able to share.
Happy to do it, Jacob. Good luck to you and your listeners.